Hello. Thank you all. Thank you, Scott, for those kind introductory remarks. And I just want to congratulate you, Scott, on the great job you're doing, not only here at the Mississippi Economic Council, but also as an appointed board member to the State Workforce Investment Board, a topic that I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about later today. But I just want to personally thank you, Scott, for all of your efforts, and to let all of you know that it is really an honor to be here with you at our 72nd annual meeting to highlight the significant strides that we are making here in Mississippi from a GDP standpoint, from a per capita income standpoint, etc. And I want to thank all of you, certainly the board members, but also all of you that are members of MEC for all of the work that y'all are doing on behalf of our businesses all across Mississippi. Not just big businesses, not just small businesses, not just intermediate-sized businesses, but businesses of all sizes in all geographic regions of our state. You know, it's true and it's a fact that the growth we have seen over the last few years in our economy has been incredible. We've seen new businesses invest capital in our state at rates at which we've never seen before. We've seen many of you that have existing businesses in our state investing capital and expanding your operations within our borders at rates that we've never seen before in Mississippi. In fact, not only that, but we've also seen tremendous progress in Mississippi with respect to educational attainment levels. When I first got elected to lieutenant governor, one of the things that we worked very hard with Speaker Gunn and his team in the House at the time was to be willing to reform our educational system and to be willing to invest in our educational system to see long-term improvements in educational attainment. And what we've seen, quite frankly, has been remarkable. In 2012, the national high school graduation rate was approximately 85%. Mississippi's at that time was 72%. But what's transpired over the last 10 years is that nationally we've seen a small but gradual uptick in high school graduation rates. In fact, we've gone from about 84.5% to 87% nationally, high school graduation rates. Mississippi in the last 10 years has gone from a 72% high school graduation rate to an 88% high school graduation rate, exceeding the national average and at an all-time high. In addition to that, we've seen economic growth lead to revenue growth unlike anything we've ever seen in the history of our state. In fact, so far in the first 9 months of this fiscal year, we are already over $900 million above the initial revenue projections. And while most everyone agrees that we'll be at least $1 billion over by the end of the year, I believe that number is probably going to be closer to $1.3 or $1.4 billion above our original revenue projections, which provided significant resources this year for our legislative leaders to make very good and wise decisions, not only on how to spend those monies, but more importantly, how to invest those monies in things like a historic teacher pay raise, the largest teacher pay raise in Mississippi history, which will allow us to now have teacher salaries in Mississippi not only above the southeastern average, but actually above the national average. And not only were we able to make that investment, we also said we ought to give pay raises to a lot of our very hard-working public servants, but we also ought to give pay raises to the taxpayers. And so, working with Speaker Gunn and Lieutenant Governor Hoseman, we delivered this year on the largest pay raise in Mississippi history. Now, I must admit, I'm saying this as the largest tax cut in Mississippi history on top of what we did in 2016, which at that time was the largest tax cut in Mississippi history. But not only are we eliminating the 3% individual income tax bracket, we're now eliminating the 4% individual income tax bracket, which means that Mississippi, once this plan is fully implemented, will have the highest exemption rate in America, meaning that the first $36,600 of personal income received by every Mississippian will be income tax free. But also there are 9 states in America that have no income tax, and we certainly want Mississippi to become the 10th, and we're not done trying. But amongst those 41 states that have an income tax, once our plan is fully implemented, we will have the 5th lowest marginal tax rate in the country. I think that speaks to the understanding by our leadership that if we can allow our people to keep more of the money that they make, it will not only reward and incentivize work, it will also, in our opinion, lead to a more efficient economy. Now, we made tremendous progress in a lot of other areas this year during this legislative session. I understand that both Speaker Gunn and Lieutenant Governor Hosemann are in the room. I'd like for them to both just stand, and let's all give them a round of applause. We had a phenomenal legislative session this year with pro-growth policies that are going to lead to continued economic growth and prosperity for many years to come. And while, as you all know, because you pay attention to the process isn't always easy and it ain't always pretty, but the end result this year, I think, are going to make a huge difference for many, many, many years to come. And I personally want to thank the two of you for your commitment to getting many of these issues done. You know, one of the things that I've talked a lot about to this group, and both before I ran for governor and in the last 3 years, is our recognition that when I started in the business of government back in the mid-2000s, every time we had a meeting about economic development, particularly about companies that were thinking about locating here, the first conversation that we had, and in many instances, the only conversation that we had back then, some 20 years ago, was about our state's incentives. What is the incentive package that I'm going to get if I decide to locate in Mississippi? And while I appreciate that's still important to individual businesses, I can assure you it is no longer the first or the second or the third or maybe even the fourth topic that we discuss in economic development meetings today. When we meet with prospective businesses, the first question is always, tell me about your workforce. Workforce is a major challenge, not only in Mississippi, but in every state across this country. And every business person, just like yourself, gets up every day wondering, am I going to be able to find an adequate number of people that have the right skills to be able to produce the product that I am producing and deliver it to the marketplace in a timely way. That's why I believe that the most important thing that we as a state can do, and there's a lot of things that we've got to continue to work to fix, but the most important thing that we could focus on from day one, even in spite of COVID-19, was workforce development and job training. We worked again with those same legislative leaders and passed the initial legislation back 2 years ago, which we've continued to improve upon as recently as yesterday when I signed a couple of those 3 workforce training bills into law. But I just want to recognize the work that is going on right now with Ryan Miller and his team at Accelerate Mississippi, our state workforce investment board, a board that Scott Waller serves on the executive committee of and helps lead the direction of the state. And the work that they are doing is making a real difference. As it was discussed yesterday in our press conference, Ryan very appropriately said that we have multiple customers for our Accelerate Mississippi product. We have multiple customers for our workforce development and workforce training efforts. You, the business people of our state, are an exceptionally important customer of those efforts. But perhaps more importantly, it's the 3 million Mississippians, our people, that we are investing in to not only try to provide a path towards a job, or in many instances a better job, but it's not just about providing a path towards a job, it's about providing a path towards a career that pays a wage much higher than what they're currently making, and a career that provides an opportunity for them to not only provide for themselves, but to provide for their families. When we signed legislation in 2020 creating the Office of Workforce Development, Accelerate Mississippi, I said then and I'll say again, it is imperative that we have someone, or in this instance, a group of someones, who wake up every single day thinking about how can we better invest in our people to provide those opportunities so they can provide for themselves. Accelerate Mississippi is doing exactly that. Ryan and his team are doing exactly that. And because of it, and because of the work of MEC and each and every one of you in this room, as well as our legislative partners, we now have a workforce strategy that is focused, one that is coordinated, and one that is well organized. And it also is one that leverages our resources efficiently and much, much, much more effectively. And the way in which we do that, as we've mentioned before, is we did it by recognizing on the front end that the best job training programs for potential employees on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and for potential employers on the Mississippi Gulf Coast are not one and the same for those training programs for those in the Mississippi Delta. And the best training programs for those that currently are living in Southwest Mississippi may or may not be exactly the same as those in Northeast Mississippi. And because of that, we did exactly what I promised to do back during the 2019 campaign, and we broke the state down in what we call our 8 ecosystems. We've already begun to have meetings with business leaders and providers of job training services in those 8 ecosystems to not only identify the types of jobs that are needed specifically in those regions, but also to specifically identify where we can find funding to meet the needs of the business community. I'm happy to say that the partnership with those communities at the local level are making a huge difference today, and the ecosystems that we have identified and the work that we are doing are going to make a huge difference for a workforce for many, many, many years into the future. We must recognize that while we should celebrate the fact that we have the lowest unemployment rate in Mississippi's history right now, we should celebrate the fact that our per capita incomes are up double digits over the last 2 years in Mississippi. We can't just simply celebrate and rest on our laurels. We must be willing to recognize the reason we find ourselves in that position and then continue to find ways to do even better. That's what my administration is focused on, and it's what we're going to continue to focus on. It's the reason that, for instance, we've already taken approximately $16.6 million of WET funds and worked to expand a range of our technical training programs at community colleges across the state. For example, we did the research to determine that over the last 5 years, there's been an average of 500 job openings in Mississippi for diesel mechanics. And yet, our community colleges, prior to about 6 months ago, produced less than 100 new graduates that could provide those jobs per year. So we invested some piece of that $16.6 million that I mentioned in doubling the size of diesel mechanic programs in various places across Mississippi. Now, some of you may say, well, you know, being a diesel mechanic ain't that sexy of a job, and maybe it's not, but did you know that the average diesel mechanic in Mississippi pays $100,000 a year? and that's with 3 to 4 years of experience. Wouldn't it be great if we had 500 additional Mississippians, some of whom are currently unemployed, some of whom are employed at $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year jobs, but if they went to school for just a short period of time, learned an additional skill, and in many instances they can do it after work. If we had those 500 additional jobs filled with individuals that had gone from either being unemployed, underemployed, or making half of that, now employed in jobs making $100,000 a year. That's the kind of laser focus that we must have in ensuring that we identify the jobs that need to be filled and recognize that we are filling them with Mississippians that have better skills because we were willing to believe in them and we were willing to invest in them. In addition, the legislation I signed yesterday ensures that Accelerate Mississippi continues upon our mission of collaboration with all state agencies, including but not limited to the Mississippi Department of Human Services, all the way to the Mississippi Department of Corrections, so that we can try to deal with those individuals that are at some point in the near future getting out of being locked up. We want them to leave Mississippi's Department of Corrections with a skill so that they can then go out into the workforce and provide for themselves and their families, because what we know for a fact is if they have a skill, if they're in a job, the likelihood of recidivism, the likelihood that they'll end up back in jail is significantly reduced. So we're going to continue to work across different executive branch agencies, across legislative branch of government and others to continue our mission to make sure that Mississippi continues to see improved educational attainment, and that includes everyone from pre-kindergarten all the way through lifelong learning, which includes K through 12 and community colleges and our institutions of higher learning, because it's not that we need a little bit more of high school graduates or a little bit more Mississippians with community college degrees that teach them a skill, or a few more college graduates. For us, it's not either or, it's both and. We need more of all of those, and we're seeing tremendous progress, of which I'm exceptionally proud. We're seeing the fruits of our labor by improved economic activity. To be perfectly honest, our economy right now is on fire. We're seeing, again, the lowest unemployment rate in our state's history, record numbers of new businesses in Mississippi, billions of dollars being invested in Mississippi. And I just believe that if we'll continue to work together as a business community, as government, as the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch of government, if we'll all continue to work together and pull in the same direction towards more growth, more economic prosperity, more educational attainment, we're going to find ourselves, again, 10 years from now, just like we find ourselves today compared to where we were 10 years ago, in a far better position. So I'm going to conclude today by simply saying my commitment to you is that we will continue to focus on those issues that matter. We're going to continue to focus on the big issues like continuing to improve educational attainment, continuing to reduce and ultimately eliminate our income tax so we can be more competitive with our neighboring states, continue to invest in the next generation of Mississippi's workforce, and yes, continue to propel Mississippi to even greater heights. Working together, I'm convinced we can make that happen. Thank you all, and God bless.
What were some of the things that happened when y'all started first focusing on this thing called the coronavirus, I guess almost 2 years ago now?
Yeah, it's been wild, as everybody knows, and I'll say how thankful I am to be here in person and without a mask. And isn't that fantastic? But you know, we've learned a lot. It was, we learned a lot. You know, it was very tumultuous in the beginning, but I think we learned a lot of things and a lot of lessons we don't need to forget. Supply chain. Remember the PPE supply chain, what a disaster that is, and we haven't fixed that. We were fortunate in Mississippi. I want to give a shout out to Mississippi companies, because when we didn't have masks, y'all may know that some Mississippis retooled their operations so that we could buy masks from them. We bought hundreds of thousands of masks from Mississippi companies who made a difference. But it's been crazy. It really has been crazy.
Now, I have to ask, have you had any sleep since all that started?
I'm sleeping better. Those first few weeks, those first few months, there were 100, 110-hour weeks, and I actually had to hire someone simply to answer my cell phone because I couldn't get any work done because people get. But it's a lot better now for sure.
Early on, you reached out to me about how we could work together, how the business community could play a role in all of this. Tell us why you felt like that was so important to build that relationship.
Well, there are so many reasons for the business community to think about health. I mean, not only in the context of COVID, but in the context of health and well-being. Part of it's going to be your community leaders, folks listen to you, right? Part of it is outside of your house, you spend more time at work than anywhere else. And so that's going to be where transmission is going to be happening. But also it helps our economic vitality, right? Because if we have workforce who are out, it can be really devastating, especially in the healthcare system. When we had nurses and healthcare folks who are out, they couldn't take care of us in the ICU or the emergency room. So it's critical to have those relationships to have good infection control.
And you mentioned the PPE, the masks, the things that businesses were doing. Were there some other things that were happening during that time where the business community was playing a role in helping in this crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of businesses were really innovative. I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time. Can I call a company out? Can I say a name? Is that okay? Yes. Yeah, okay. So Sanderson Farms was great. I mean, we'd have regular calls, and they would talk about their safety protocols. They would run stuff by us, proactive, because we're running crazy, and we're not able to sort of reach out to everybody. But having business leaders be proactive, make decisions, and then really be ahead of the curve on so many things. And it wasn't just Sanderson; it was a lot of other folks who were ahead, making sure that their workforce was safe, but also that they could maintain productivity.
We talk a lot about the importance of a public-private partnership, and again, being a government agency, what you do. Why is it so important, and what are the things that we can, as we look forward, we can do so that businesses can be of assistance during a time of crisis?
Yeah, no, I think there's just an innumerable number of things. Understand the leadership role, because in a thing like COVID, where there were a lot of voices out there and a lot of voices that really didn't make any sense, right? And people were distracted and confused. In our country and in Mississippi, we value business, we value the economic models, we value what work gives people. And these are voices that are stable, they're non-political, and they can cut through the nonsense. So being that voice is so important.
I think regardless of a situation, when something's happening and you're doing it, and then you look back and you may think, well, if I could have done this differently, or if I'd have done that differently, it would have been a little bit easier. But again, in doing that, you're learning at the same time. What are some of the key lessons that we need to take away from this as we move forward?
So I think we all need to understand that we all need good and dependable government, right? We know that government should have a limited role, but when you need it, you need it. You need it to operate properly. And when I first came to the Department of Health about 4 years ago, my intent was to make it a stronger, more efficient, resilient organization. And fortunately, I had about 2 years leading up to that when the COVID hit. So I had a great leadership team. And I think some of the things that we were able to do, although they weren't perfect, were really pretty remarkable from a national perspective. If you look at our drive-through locations, we gave hundreds of thousands of shots within a matter of weeks with an efficiency that some people told me rivaled Chick-fil-A, which was one of the best compliments I had the whole time. So government can be done properly. It's a challenge, though, because there are so many intrinsic impediments because people want government to go slow. But sometimes we need to be efficient, and it can be done properly. And just keep that in mind that should be a priority, because we have to be partners with other parts of the state.
Well, just so you know, that was such an efficient process. I went through it. I was having a conversation with General Collins, and he said, the military was in charge. That's why it worked. So that's exactly what he told me.
Yeah, the National Guard was fantastic. It was unbelievable.
Over the past few months, things are starting to feel normal. I mean, the general mentioned that we've had the occasional setback, but all in all, things are looking ahead. How do you see where we are right now, and kind of what do you see as next?
When this started and we didn't have tools and we didn't have information, and we also certainly had a lot of panic out there, right? There were a lot of broad public interventions that happened across the country and across the state. And they worked, but they had a price. They caused a lot of hardship. But we're not in that sort of public health sort of directed mode. We're moving from a public health response to a medical response. We know what the virus is, we know how to prevent it, we know how to diagnose it, and we have fantastic treatments. So we need to start thinking more about it from an individual risk reduction and protection perspective, but also if folks get sick, you got to get tested, talk to your doctor, talk to your provider, and get treated, because we have great treatments.
All right, so I'm an old Eagle Scout, meaning I'm old and I'm an Eagle Scout. You always are one, right? But the motto of scouting is be prepared. How can businesses be better prepared for the next crisis as a result of what we've learned in this?
Well, don't forget the lessons that we've had to learn, right? It's really easy to think this is never going to happen again, but we already have things happening. We're in a global world now, and things happen all the time. We've just got a new report of this weird hepatitis for kids that's now starting to spread. I mean, there's always going to be these sort of threats from here on out. So please remember those challenges. Have a resiliency plan in Department of Health and Government. We have what we call a continuity of operations plan, and a lot of you guys probably have that. Think about operating in adverse circumstances, and then prioritize employee health and wellness. If with a healthy workforce, that's really where your operational productivity comes from.
And one final question. What's next?
Oh, yeah. A little bit of a vacation for a few weeks, but then I'm going to go back to being a physician. I've been a practicing physician and a teacher, educator for a long time. And so it looks like I'll probably join the faculty at UMC and be infectious disease physician and do some good stuff over there. Lots of good work. There's no lack of targets of good work in Mississippi. There's lots to be done.
Well, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for all that you have done for our state over the last 2 years. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please give Dr. Dobbs a round of applause.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks. Hey, thanks for having me.
Again, thank everyone for being here. It's been a wonderful day. We are officially adjourned.
All right, I don't have to